Hello again, everybody. We are back. We are back with the Kite Runner. So today we're going to talk about because I am an English teacher, I'm a high school English teacher, I am contractually obligated to discuss symbols and themes. Hooray! All right, symbols and themes. So why do we even talk about symbols and themes? Why are high school teachers so sort of hot for symbols and themes? I think it's because one of the things I keep trying to remind my students is that these books, and frankly, all art everywhere, is constructed. All art is made. It doesn't just happen. In the same way that cars don't happen, and hamburgers don't happen, and houses don't happen. Books don't just happen. They're crafted, usually over many drafts. And a lot of writers, well, not every writer is really intent on creating deep and resonant themes in their books. Sometimes they just sort of happen. I remember reading Stephen King talking about blood as a motif in his book Carrie. And he noticed that every time Carrie went through some sort of traumatic moment, there was always blood on the scene somewhere. And so that was in his first draft. So when he went back to rewrite it, he was much more conscious of that and much more deliberate about how he used blood in the novel. And we all remember how that ended. So I think English teachers like to talk about symbols and themes because they are a way to demonstrate a very purposeful mode of writing that these good writers, especially, are able to choose to put these things in, and they choose them for a reason. So, if that's why you wondered why your English teacher was so hot for symbols and themes, that's pretty much why. Because we want to prove to you that these things didn't just appear one day. They were made by human beings who wanted to say something about the world. So, for the Kite Runner, one of the biggest themes, of course, is guilt and shame. The narrator, Amir, feels intense guilt for running away when his best friend slash servant slash half brother, but he didn't know it at the time, was raped in an alleyway by a local bully. And Amir's shame is kind of what drives him through the story. It is what drives him to form and break relationships. It is what drives him even when he and his father moved to America. It is always there. And what really kickstarts the story, what makes the story happen, is the opportunity to redeem himself, the opportunity to come back to Afghanistan and save Hassan's son. And I think Hosseini is talking a lot about guilt and shame in a couple different ways. Number one, as a destructive force, certainly. The guilt that Amir felt because he didn't stop Hassan's rape, and he didn't tell anybody either. He didn't come home and tell his dad. He didn't tell anybody. And this knowledge of what he had done and the shame of what he had done had led him to push Hassan away, to a point where after his big birthday party, he got this big, nice special watch, and he tried to frame Hassan for stealing it. And we know Hassan didn't steal it. Hassan knows that Hassan didn't steal it. But Hassan is such a good person and such a good friend that when Baba said, "Did you steal the watch?" Hassan said, "Yes, of course," because he couldn't bear to get Amir in trouble. And that led to Hassan and his father leaving the house, which was a terrible, terrible moment for their family because they had been there forever. Hassan's father, Ali, had been Baba's best friend when they were children, right? So this guilt that Amir felt shattered this family unit insofar as it was a family. And as it came back he talks about when they finally moved to America, that always in the back of his mind somewhere is that moment. There's that blue kite that they were chasing when Asif caught up with Hassan, those corduroy pants thrown on the ground. It was always kind of in the back of his mind, and he knew at a certain point that he was going to have to deal with it. And I think Hosseini is kind of looking at guilt and shame and saying that, yeah, feeling guilty about something is awful. It can be extremely destructive to a person. We can ask ourselves whether young Amir really deserved to feel as guilty as he was, because he was a child. I think I've mentioned this before. Young Amir was he was a boy. He was a child. He was like 11 or 12 years old, maybe. And can we be truly angry at a child who runs away? Who runs away when he's afraid of something? It's great if he can stand up and be a hero. And I often said that, he desperately wants his father's love. And he saw his father's love embodied in this kite that he won in kite fighting. And so after Hassan was raped, Hassan came back with the kite, and Amir's like, I have the kite. My father will love me again. And I tell my students, I'm like, I wonder if that his father probably would have loved him more if he had come back and said, yeah, I got my ass kicked standing up for Hassan. Especially when we learned that Amir's dad is also Hassan's dad. He probably would have really gotten the love that he always wanted from his father if he had done that. But then there is the idea of redemption, that your guilt at some point in your life, at some point in your life, you've got to deal with your guilt and deal with your shame. And that is the redemption quest that Amir goes on as an adult, as the narrator. And one of the things that a lot of writers do with redemption quests is they will create a single moment and say, there, you are redeemed. The one that comes to mind always for me, of course, is Darth Vader. Darth Vader in Star Wars is awful. He is the worst person ever. He is a murderer on a galactic scale. But he does this one good thing. He tosses the Emperor into a pit. Sorry if you haven't seen the movies, but you should have seen the movies by now. He tosses the Emperor into the pit, and then, redeemed. He takes off his helmet, and then he's a Force ghost with everybody else. That's not really how redemption works. You don't get to do one good thing and then die, and then you're redeemed. Redemption is a difficult process. It is a quest. And it is hard. You have to give something up. And in this story, yeah, Amir does give something up. He gets very, very badly beaten by Asaf as an adult in trying to rescue Sohrab, who is Hassan's son. And he's in the hospital for a very, very long time. He nearly loses Sohrab after foolishly making a promise he could not keep. But dealing with the bureaucracy of trying to take this boy from Afghanistan to the United States, there's a moment where Sohrab tries to kill himself because he thinks he's going to be sent back to an orphanage. And Amir has to now live with maybe another wave of guilt that he may have caused Sohrab's death, or at the very least Sohrab's suicide. And we know that at the end of the book, we don't get the feeling that Amir's done. He has not redeemed himself yet, but we do sense that he is on the path to redemption. He is working on it, and it will probably be an entire life's work. I don't think at any point in his life Amir will probably think, I've done it. I have redeemed myself for what I did as a child. And again, you could argue, should he have to? Should we have to make up for the things that we did as a child? There's arguments for, there's arguments against, and I think it's worth discussing, especially in the context of this book. And then there is additional guilt and shame to be had. Baba, of course, as I said, is Hassan's father. So Baba had this secret relationship with Hassan's mother, his servant's wife, and his son, his son's half-brother, his illegitimate son, is living in the house as a servant, and Baba says nothing to anybody, never tells anybody, even though Baba was very adamant that lying was one of the worst things you could do because it is the theft of truth from people. He still never told his son about who his best friend actually was. So Baba lives with this shame, and Baba never really resolves it. He lives and he dies. He comes to America with Amir. He eventually gets cancer and he dies. Baba never resolves this truth. He never tells his son the truth. Amir has to find out from other channels. So yeah, there are good examples of what guilt can do, what redemption means, what redemption looks like and doesn't look like in this book. And you really kind of want Amir to succeed. You do, because he was a little jerk as a kid, but aren't we all little jerks as kids? But you want Amir to succeed. You want Amir to make good on what happened and what he's done. And I think Hosseini does a very good job of making us want Amir to succeed in his redemption quest. Now, symbols. There's a kite. It's called the Kite Runner. It's right there in the title, so there's got to be a kite. And there is. One of the centerpieces of especially the first act is this kite fighting festival in Kabul in the spring, in the winter, I should say. And the way that it works is that the kids make kites, or they buy them if they got the money, and then they coat the string with like ground glass, and then they go out and they fly the kites and they try to cut the strings of their opponents. And if you cut an opponent's string, then everybody goes running to catch that kite. The kites are the trophies. And so Amir is the kite flyer, and Hassan is the titular kite runner. Hassan is the one who has, and again, we talked a little bit about how the memory of Amir, who feels terribly guilty about his friend, maybe colors the way Hassan is characterized in the book, but like he says that Hassan always knows where the kite is going. Nobody knows how he knows, but Hassan's always able to find it. And he does. And for Amir, this kite is initially a symbol of his success. He's going to win it. He's going to bring it back to his dad, and his dad is going to love him because his dad wants him to be a sporty, manly kid, and he's not. He's a little nebbishy writer. But he's like, if I can get this kite, my dad will love me. But unfortunately, the price for getting the kite becomes Hassan's rape. Hassan is caught with the kite. Asif rapes him, and Hassan eventually comes back with the kite and says, here you go. And Amir, who is a little jerk as a kid, says, oh, you got the kite, great! And that's basically it. He tries to forget what just happened to his best friend. So that is where the kite is set up as this symbol of this father-son relationship. You can use your general sort of symbology of kites anyway as a symbol of freedom, tethered to the ground, so limited freedom flying in the sky, but I don't really need that. I just need it as a symbol of this relationship between father and son. And it goes away after that festival where Hassan is raped. We don't see kites again until the very end of the book when Amir has brought Sohrab back to the United States. Sohrab has attempted to kill himself because he thought that he was going to be in an orphanage again. And he's selective mutism. The boy does not speak. The boy is not happy. The child, Sohrab, has a very, very hard time, understandably so, because he grew up as a sex slave. That's not going to be easy for anybody. But at the very, very, very end of the book, Amir takes him out to a local kite festival where they're flying kites in the Afghani way. And in that moment when they cut an opponent's kite down, and Amir turns to Sohrab and says, do you want me to get that kite for you? And Sohrab just sort of nods. And the very end of the book is Amir running to get that kite. The roles have reversed. The kite is a symbol again of his redemption. This kite is no longer a symbol of guilt and shame. The kite is a symbol of Amir's attempt to redeem himself and to do well by his childhood friend whom he let down. So yeah, like the kites, it's not a hard symbol to work out, honestly. If you as a high school student are reading that book and your teacher says, so what do you think of the symbol of the kite? Don't overthink it. It means exactly what you think it means. But it's lovely. It is quite nice. It is not overdone, despite again being in the title, but it's a good symbol. The last symbol I want to talk about, or more of a motif in this sense, is the motif of scars and injuries. So there's quite a few scars and injuries in this book, weirdly enough. Hassan is born with a hair lip and I think a cleft palate, which the scar stays with him for all his life, which at one point Baba, as a birthday present, hires a doctor to take care of it. And of course, at the time, we, the reader, we were like, why is he going through all the effort and money to bring a doctor in to fix Hassan's hair lip? And then later we find out that, of course, he's Hassan's father. So that makes more sense. But later on in the book, when Amir is trying to fight for Hassan's son, Amir gets very badly beaten. And one of the scars that Amir picks up is, of course, a scar right across his upper lip that mirrors the scar Hassan had. So that is a lovely mirroring there, where he has taken on an injury in honor of his friend, whom he should have helped as a child. He's actually quite a few scars. That fight scene at the end, if you read it, is really, really tough because not only is it's fairly well written as a fight scene up against one man who loves violence, which is Asif, and another man who has no business being in a fist fight, which is Amir. And it is brutal. And it's interspersed with sort of Amir's hazy coming to consciousness in a hospital and sort of realizing that he's in the hospital, and it snaps back to the fight again where he's getting badly beaten. And at one point at the very beginning of the book, when Asif is threatening Amir and Hassan, Hassan's got a slingshot and threatens to turn him into one-eyed Asif, which later in life, that is how young Sohrab saves Amir from Asif. He actually picks up a little bronze or brass ball and puts Asif's eye out. So now we have another injury. That is the price of their freedom. With that injury, Amir and Sohrab are able to escape and get out. So what else we got? Sohrab's wrists, of course, he grows up in after Hassan dies, Sohrab lives in orphanage, where children are sometimes sold to the Taliban, because it's either you sell a child to the Taliban for them to use however they please, or the whole place gets shut down. But yeah, little Sohrab, when he believes that he's going to be sent back to another orphanage, he decides that death is preferable and he tries to kill himself. So those are the scars of his memory and his pain. He would rather die than stay in an orphanage and potentially be sold off to the Taliban again. And for Amir, as his now substitute father, he sees those scars and he remembers that they are a symbol of how he screwed up, because he promised the boy, yeah, you're coming to America. And then he kind of went back on that promise. Oh, you have to stay in an orphanage for a little while. And so again, they're a symbol to Amir of his potential failure for this child. And then, of course, there's all these little internal scars, right? Everybody, not everybody, definitely Amir, has these internal scars. Amir failed to save his friend. That is the driving force of everything that happens in this book. Amir failed to save Hassan from Asif. And that mental or emotional wound stays with him for the whole book. He pushes Hassan away because he can't see him, because every time he sees Hassan, he remembers his failure and his guilt. And again, he's a child, but rather than deal with that guilt and failure, he pushes Hassan away. Like, if I don't see him, then I won't have to think about it. But that, of course, is not true. That stays with him for his whole life. And it is the scar that he's trying to heal throughout this whole book. And what's interesting also is that Hassan himself, who was the one who was injured and raped in an alleyway, does not seem to have endured a scar, which is fascinating, because usually when people are violently sexually assaulted, it sticks with them. But that's where, again, we kind of have to ask ourselves if the narrator is remembering correctly, if the narrator is only remembering perfect, loving, happy Hassan and not suffering Hassan. So yeah, all throughout this book, these motifs of scars and injuries are everywhere. And each scar is there for, each injury means something. Each injury is addressed to one. We know where they come from. We know where they go to. And we're able to link it to some bigger idea that permeates the story of redemption or failure or guilt or imperfection or all these things. So that's really, really useful as well. Maybe the last kind of motif we'll talk about. We don't have a ton of time left, but the last thing we'll talk about is certainly father-son relationships. It's a big one in this story. And the biggest one, of course, is that between Amir and his father, Baba. All Amir wants is for his father to be proud of him. Amir's mother died in childbirth, and even as a child, he kind of blamed himself for that. And so all he wants is for his father to love him. And that leads to him making some, honestly, very poor choices. But aside from his dad, aside from Baba, there is Rahim Khan, who is Baba's old family friend, who honestly is much better of a father figure to Amir than Baba is. Baba wants him to be a soccer player and a macho man. Rahim Khan sees that the boy wants to be a writer and gives him a notebook and encourages his writing, and really is the only one adult who's able to talk kind of in a very heart-to-heart way with him. But Amir doesn't really recognize this, because he sees, that's my dad. Baba is my dad. I want to impress my dad. And that's all there is. And they do resolve their relationship after he grows up, after they move to America and they leave Afghanistan. The relationship becomes resolved. Baba understands that his boy is not only wants to be a writer, but is a good writer. He sees his son get married. And for all intents and purposes, it seems like everything has been resolved with them, until we find out that Baba had been lying the whole time, that Baba was in fact Hassan's father as well. In that relationship now, we have to go back to the beginning of the book and re-examine it, and we see why Baba helps pay for Hassan's surgery. We see why Baba is so adamant that Hassan and his father Ali are not kicked out of the house, even when it looks like Hassan has stolen, which again, the great crime is stealing. Even when it looks like Hassan has stolen, Baba says, no, you get to stay. And Amir, the child narrator, doesn't understand, and we don't understand until later why that is. There is this relationship that he can't acknowledge, because it would bring shame on his family, because he's a very proud man. And so we see that relationship is very difficult. It adds this tension that nobody else understands until much later, and then later, when you learn about it, it explains a whole lot. And Hassan has his own father, Ali, who was Baba's best friend as a child, and they are both just these lovely, innocent Hazara people who work at the house and work for the family and can do no wrong. But you don't, I mean, you don't really get much of a sense of the relationship between the two of them, because our narrator is rarely there to witness that. Because our narrator, Hassan and Amir, live in a mud hut outside the big house. And God knows Hassan and Ali, right? Amir isn't going to go out there and hang out in the mud hut. So we've got that. Then later on, we have some other ones as well. We have Amir with his father-in-law, who used to be a bigwig in the Afghani government. Amir's father-in-law is often referred to as the general, because that's what he did when he was working in the Afghani government. He was a general. He was very important. When the Taliban took over, he got out, and he kind of constantly expects to be called back. And he is sort of the traditionalist Afghani immigrant to the U.S. He still wants his family to sort of operate on traditional grounds. He doesn't let his wife sing, for example, because it's not done in public. But there's a wonderful point where he is talking about Sorab, who's a Hazara child. And again, the Hazara are sort of a second-class ethnic group. And the father-in-law keeps talking about that boy, that boy, that boy. And our Amir stands up for him, says his name is Sorab. And if you call him that boy again, you're no longer welcome in my house. So it's really nice to see Amir kind of standing up for these relationships and standing up to a father figure, in a sense, that he wasn't able to do with his dad. So these relationships are important. Again, they're part of the core of the overall book. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There's, I think, a reason why a lot of English teachers do like to do this book, is because there's a ton you can get from it if you're willing to do the work. And I'm sorry, students, if you're watching, you've got to do the work on all of these books. You have to think about these things. Don't let us think for you. That's not what we want to do. So that is it for now. We'll be back fairly soon with another one. And until then, I hope you have a good time. See you in the next video.